Alien girl hid beside the human's fire after her crash. Her first honest smile was the real rescue. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Zara's eyes fluttered open, her vision blurry as she lay on the cold, damp ground. The air smelled unfamiliar, filled with the earthy scent of trees and the faint, smoky undertones of a fire. She tried to move, but a sharp pain shot through her side. Her mind struggled to make sense of her surroundings. She had been in her ship, exploring the stars, when everything went wrong. A malfunction, an unexpected crash, and now, here she was, far from home, in a world she didn't understand. Zara forced herself to sit up, wincing at the movement. The fire in the distance flickered brightly, almost inviting. She knew she had to reach it if she wanted warmth, if she wanted to survive. With great effort, she pulled herself to her feet and stumbled toward the light. Her steps were unsteady, her body still weak from the crash, but the pull of the fire was undeniable. As she drew closer, the fire seemed to grow larger, and soon, she could make out a figure sitting beside it. A human. He didn't look like any of the beings she had seen during her travels. His skin was pale, his hair dark, and he was staring into the fire, unaware of her presence. Zara froze, unsure of what to do. She had encountered humans before, but never like this. Alone, vulnerable. She wasn't sure if they were hostile or kind, but she knew she needed help. The human didn't notice her at first, so she stood there, hidden in the shadows, her heart racing. She had never been so close to someone from Earth before. She had studied them, observed them, but this felt different. The human finally looked up, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Zara felt a strange, almost magnetic pull toward him, as if the warmth of the fire wasn't the only thing that drew her in. The human slowly stood, his movements cautious, as if trying to assess whether she was a threat. Zara took a step forward, carefully, not wanting to startle him. She had to communicate, to make him understand that she was not dangerous. She didn't know how to begin, but she had to try. He opened his mouth, as though to speak, but before he could, the wind howled through the trees, breaking the silence. The sound was both eerie and comforting, as if nature itself was reminding them that they weren't alone. Zara's heart skipped a beat. This was her moment. This was where everything would either change or end. She took another step, closing the distance between them. She tried to speak, but the words were foreign, clumsy on her tongue. All she could manage was a soft, strained sound. The human seemed to understand that she was in pain, and without hesitation, he stepped closer, offering her his hand. Zara hesitated for a moment, but then, trusting him in a way she didn't fully understand, she accepted. The warmth of his hand was the first human contact she had felt since the crash. It was a small gesture, but to Zara, it felt like the first real connection she had made in this strange, unfamiliar world. She looked into his eyes, trying to convey that she wasn't a threat, that she just needed help. Her breath was shallow, her body weak, but there was something in her that began to feel hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this human could be her first ally on Earth. John hesitated for a moment, his hand still extended towards Zara. Her strange appearance, the glint of something otherworldly in her eyes, made him unsure. But he could see the pain in her expression, the way she was trembling, and something inside him urged him to help. Slowly, he took a cautious step closer, lowering his hand to her level. Zara, still unsure of this human and the world around her, slowly accepted the gesture. The moment her fingers touched his, a warmth spread through her, not just from his hand, but something deeper, a feeling of connection. For a brief second, she felt less alone in this strange world. "You're hurt," John said softly, his voice calm but filled with concern. Zara tried to respond, but her throat felt dry, and the words she wanted to speak didn't quite come out. She nodded instead, trying to show him that she understood. John crouched down beside her, his eyes scanning the surroundings for anything that could help. The fire crackled beside them, casting a warm glow, but the rest of the forest was dark and eerily quiet. The cold night air made Zara shiver, and she instinctively pulled her jacket tighter around her. John, noticing this, stood up and quickly removed his own jacket, draping it over her shoulders. Zara didn't understand the gesture, but she felt the warmth of the fabric and the kindness behind it. It was the first time in what felt like forever that someone had shown her such a simple act of care. "You're safe now," John said, his tone gentle but firm, trying to reassure her. Zara looked into his eyes, searching for the meaning behind his words. She had never known safety like this. In her world, safety was a constant fight, always guarded, always on alert. Here, with this human, things were different. He didn't seem afraid of her. He didn't seem to see her as a threat. She had heard of humans, of their kindness, their courage, but she never expected to experience it firsthand. As John settled beside the fire, he continued to watch her closely. He could tell she was struggling, trying to find a way to communicate. He was no expert in alien languages, but he knew the basics of body language. Slowly, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small water bottle. Offering it to her, he said, "You need water. It'll help." Zara hesitated before accepting the bottle. The human seemed so ordinary, yet there was something about his presence that calmed her. She unscrewed the cap and took a small sip. The cold water felt refreshing, but it was more than that. It was a reminder that she was no longer alone. The human, John, was here, and for some reason, he was helping her. Zara glanced at him again, trying to process everything. Who was he? What was he doing here? And more importantly, why was he helping her, a stranger from another world? Her thoughts were interrupted as John spoke again. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice still kind, but now tinged with curiosity. Zara struggled with the sound of his language. The words felt foreign on her tongue. She had no name for herself in this place, no way to communicate her true identity. She hesitated, then simply pointed to herself, hoping he would understand. "Zara," she said, the word awkward on her lips. It was the closest approximation of her name, a name she had used in her own language for years. John nodded, understanding. "Zara," he repeated, testing the sound of it. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The silence stretched between them, comfortable in its own way. The fire crackled softly, the only sound in the otherwise still night. For the first time in a long while, Zara felt a sense of peace. She wasn't sure where her journey would take her next or if she would ever find a way back to her home. But at this moment, she wasn't alone. And that, in itself, felt like a small miracle. The fire crackled softly, and the night stretched on, the only sound between John and Zara the occasional snap of burning wood. Zara was still wrapped in the warmth of his jacket, and despite her aching body, she felt a strange sense of calm. The human, John, had offered her food and water, and his kind gestures were slowly beginning to ease her discomfort. She could feel the cold night air creeping in around them, but she wasn't afraid. For the first time since the crash, she wasn't alone. John sat beside her, occasionally glancing at the stars above them. His eyes were thoughtful, and it was clear he had questions, though he didn't push her to answer them. He seemed content to let the silence linger. Zara was still trying to make sense of everything. This world, these people, their ways of life. Earth was nothing like her home. There were no familiar faces here, no language she could understand without effort, no technology that could help her fix her ship. She thought about her ship, still broken, hidden somewhere in the forest. She couldn't fix it alone. She wasn't sure if she could even trust this human. Yet, there was something about him that made her believe he might help her. There was something about the way he looked at her, not with fear, but with curiosity, with an open mind. It was a look she hadn't seen from anyone in a long time. As the night wore on, John reached into his backpack again and pulled out a small flashlight. "I'll keep watch for a while," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You should rest." Zara nodded, grateful for the offer. She didn't know how long she had been awake, but the exhaustion was starting to catch up with her. She settled back against the tree, still holding on to his jacket for warmth, and closed her eyes. Despite the strangeness of her situation, despite the fear she had felt earlier, she felt an overwhelming sense of trust in this human. She wasn't sure why, but there was something in his actions, in the way he had treated her, that made her believe he was different. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard him murmur something under his breath. She couldn't make out the words, but she felt a sense of peace. The warmth of the fire, the soft sound of his voice, and the safety of his presence surrounded her. It was a strange feeling, one she hadn't experienced in a long time. The next morning, Zara woke to the sound of birds chirping in the distance. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft orange glow across the sky. John was still by the fire, his back to her as he poked at the embers. He seemed deep in thought, but when he noticed she was awake, he gave her a small smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice still gentle. Zara returned the smile, though it was small and uncertain. "Morning," she replied softly, trying her best to mimic his words. It felt strange on her tongue, but it was a start. She slowly sat up, stretching her stiff limbs. The pain in her side had dulled, and she felt stronger than she had the night before. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the forest, the unfamiliar trees, the strange plants. This was Earth, her new reality. John handed her some more water, and she took it gratefully. It wasn't much, but it was enough to help her feel grounded, to help her focus. As she drank, she glanced over at the broken remains of her ship in the distance, half hidden by the trees. She knew that if she wanted to return home, she would need help. And John, though a stranger, seemed to be the only person who could offer it. "I need to fix my ship," Zara said quietly, her voice still rough from the crash. John looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I can help you," he said, his voice steady. Zara met his gaze, feeling a flicker of hope stir within her. Maybe, just maybe, this human could be the key to getting her home. The morning light grew stronger as Zara and John stood at the edge of the small clearing, looking toward the remains of her ship. It was a wreck, its metal frame twisted and scorched, half hidden by the thick forest. Zara felt a pang of loss in her chest as she gazed at the damaged vessel. This was her only way back home, and yet it seemed so far beyond her reach. She turned to John, her expression filled with quiet determination. "I need to fix it," she said again, her voice firm. John nodded, his brow furrowing as he considered her words. "We'll do what we can," he replied, his voice calm but reassuring. Zara wasn't sure what he meant by that. Could a human really help her? She had no idea how to communicate her technology, her ship's systems, to someone who had never seen anything like it. But the kindness in his eyes, the sincerity of his offer, gave her a glimmer of hope. They began walking toward the wreckage, the damp grass crunching beneath their feet. As they reached the site, John looked at the twisted metal, his hands on his hips as he took in the damage. Zara could see his mind working, trying to understand what needed to be done. "This is a lot worse than I thought," he said softly, almost to himself. Zara knelt beside the ship, inspecting the damage closely. There were deep burns along the side, and one of the engines was barely recognizable, a heap of scorched metal. She reached out to touch the surface, her fingers brushing over the ruined controls. She winced, remembering the crash, the sudden loss of control, the panic, the terror as her ship had spiraled out of the sky. John kneeled next to her, looking over the ship with a puzzled expression. What is all this?" he asked, pointing to the alien symbols that were etched along the hull. Zara's heart sank. She had no idea how to explain it to him. The technology was beyond anything he could understand. But she had to try. Slowly, she traced her fingers over the symbols, then pointed to the engine, trying to communicate the problem. John watched her closely, his eyes scanning her movements, trying to pick up on the meaning. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "You're trying to tell me that this engine is the problem?" Zara nodded, relieved that he seemed to understand, even if it was just a little bit. John stood up, running a hand through his hair as he thought. "Okay," he said, "I think I can help. I don't know much about alien technology, but I know a thing or two about machines. We'll try to get it working." Zara's heart lifted a little. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She watched as John began to move around the wreckage, pulling out tools from his backpack. He was methodical, focusing on each piece of debris with a precision that surprised her. Zara stood back, taking a deep breath. The feeling of being stuck, of being lost, began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. This human, this stranger, was trying to help her. And for the first time in a long while, Zara allowed herself to believe it might be possible. Slowly, as John worked, Zara found herself watching him with growing curiosity. He didn't seem afraid of her, nor did he look at her with suspicion. Instead, he treated her like an equal, like someone worth helping. She could see his focus, his dedication to the task at hand. It was something she had seen only in the engineers of her home world, and it was a quality she respected. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. She knew her ship wasn't just going to fix itself, and there were so many things that could go wrong. But for the first time since her crash, Zara felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't so alone in this strange world after all. Zara watched John closely as he worked, his hands moving with practiced precision as he fiddled with the pieces of her ship's damaged engine. Despite the confusion and uncertainty still swirling in her mind, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of admiration for him. He wasn't intimidated by her or by the wreckage of her ship, and most importantly, he was trying. He was really trying to help her. Zara had never known someone who would do this for her, someone who would offer their time and effort without expecting anything in return. The sun had risen higher in the sky, its warm rays filtering through the trees and casting soft shadows on the forest floor. The fire they had started earlier had burned down to a few embers, but the warmth from it still lingered in the air. John paused for a moment, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, and looked over at Zara. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle, as if aware of the strange tension in the air between them. Zara hesitated, unsure of how to answer. How was she holding up? She was stranded on a foreign world with a broken ship and no idea how to get home. But somehow, she felt different, better. For the first time in days, maybe even weeks, she felt like she wasn't completely lost. Okay, she finally said, her voice softer than she intended. She hadn't expected to feel this way, this sense of calm that had settled over her, despite the uncertainty of her situation. She wasn't alone anymore. "Good," John replied with a small smile, before turning his attention back to the ship's engine. Zara watched him for a moment, his hands deftly working with the tools he had found in his backpack. She couldn't help but be impressed by his focus and determination. It was as though nothing in the world mattered except fixing the engine, helping her. A strange thought crossed her mind. She wondered if he truly understood what it meant for her to be here, on Earth, stranded without any way to communicate with her people. Did he know how much she needed him, even if she didn't have the words to explain it? She shook the thought away, pushing it to the back of her mind. She didn't have the luxury of time to wonder. She had to stay focused. "I think I've got it," John said suddenly, his voice full of satisfaction. He looked up at her, his face lighting up with a hint of pride. "I've managed to fix the power conduit. We should be able to get the engine running again, at least for a while." Zara blinked, trying to process the information. She had no idea what a power conduit was, but if it meant her ship might start working again, she felt a surge of hope. She nodded slowly, her heart lifting just a little. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but filled with gratitude. John's smile widened at her words, and for a moment, it was as if they were the only two beings in the world. The connection between them, the understanding that had developed over the past day, seemed stronger now. "Don't mention it," he replied, his tone humble. "We're in this together." Zara felt a flicker of warmth in her chest at those words. It wasn't just the warmth of the fire or the sun overhead. It was something deeper, something that made her feel as if, despite everything that had gone wrong, she might just be able to make it through. She wasn't alone, not anymore. She had John, and that made all the difference. As the day wore on, they continued working side by side, Zara observing John as he fixed various parts of the ship. He seemed determined, almost relentless, as if nothing could stop him from getting it back in working order. She didn't understand how he knew what to do, but it didn't matter. His confidence in his ability, in his willingness to help her, made her believe that, with time, they might actually make it work. Zara glanced at him again, and this time, there was no hesitation. She smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. It was the first real smile she had given since her crash, and it felt right. John saw it, and his own expression softened. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. They were in this together. And for the first time since she arrived on Earth, Zara believed that maybe, just maybe, she could find her way home. As the days passed, Zara and John continued their work on the ship, each day bringing them closer to something that felt like a possibility. The engine was still far from fixed, but there were small victories along the way. Wires reconnected, broken parts replaced, and systems slowly coming back to life. The forest around them had become their temporary home, a quiet place where time seemed to stretch, and the outside world was nothing more than a distant thought. Zara found herself growing more accustomed to Earth, to its sounds, its smells, and even its strange creatures. She had never imagined that she would find any peace on this foreign planet, but in the calm of the forest, she found herself feeling more and more at ease. There were still moments of fear, moments when the overwhelming loneliness of her situation would creep back in, but then she would look at John, working tirelessly beside her, and the fear would fade. He had become her anchor in this world, and she realized, perhaps for the first time since the crash, that she wasn't as alone as she had thought. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting the forest in soft golden light, John stood up from the wreckage and stretched his arms. "I think we're making progress," he said, his voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "It's not perfect, but it's something." Zara looked over at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She had never known a human to work so hard for a stranger, to give so much without expecting anything in return. She had always been taught that the universe was vast, that everything had its place, but never had she imagined that her place would be here, with a human who didn't question her, didn't fear her. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. John turned to her, his expression gentle. "I told you, we're in this together." The simplicity of his words struck a chord deep within her. In that moment, Zara realized just how much those words meant. She had come to this planet thinking she was completely alone, that she would never find her way home. But now, with John by her side, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could make it back. It wasn't just about fixing the ship anymore. It was about something deeper, something about trust, about connection, about finding a way forward, even when the path seemed uncertain. The fire crackled beside them, and Zara watched the flames dance as they had so many times before. She wasn't sure how much longer they would need to fix the ship, or what the future held for them. But for the first time since the crash, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, truly living, in a way she hadn't in a long time. As the night grew darker, John sat down beside her, his back against a tree. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. Zara had never been one to feel connected to the stars before. She had always seen them as distant points of light, unreachable and cold. But now, with the warmth of the fire at her back and the presence of John beside her, the stars seemed different. They felt like a promise, a reminder that no matter how far away her home was, no matter how impossible the journey seemed, she wasn't alone. Not anymore. "You know," John said, breaking the silence, "I've always wondered about the stars, about what's out there. Now that I'm sitting here with you, I think I understand a little more." Zara turned to him, surprised by his words. He had always seemed so grounded, so practical. But in that moment, she saw something else in his eyes, a quiet wonder, a curiosity about the universe that mirrored her own. "You're not so different from us," she said softly, the words coming out before she even realized it. John raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "You look at the stars the way we do," Zara replied. "With wonder. With hope." John smiled, the expression warm and genuine. "Maybe," he said, "we're not so different after all." Zara smiled back, the first real smile she had shared with him since the crash. It was small, but it was honest. And in that moment, it felt like everything was falling into place. She wasn't just fixing her ship. She was fixing something much deeper, something that had been broken inside her for a long time. And as the stars continued to shine above them, Zara felt, for the first time, that maybe she could make it home after all. Days passed, and with each one, Zara and John found themselves inching closer to a solution. The forest around them became less of an obstacle and more of a familiar backdrop, a constant presence as they worked on the ship together. Their progress was slow but steady. Pieces of the engine that once seemed irreparable now hummed with faint, hopeful energy. The small victories built up, and Zara couldn't help but feel the weight of the past few weeks begin to lift, even if just slightly. They had built a routine. Every morning, John would set out to gather more supplies, wood for the fire, more water from a nearby stream, and Zara would continue inspecting the wreckage, trying to make sense of the complex systems that once powered her ship. Sometimes, they would share a quiet meal, the silence between them comfortable, their unspoken understanding growing with each passing day. Despite the progress, there was still an unshakable feeling of uncertainty. Zara had always been a survivor, but Earth, with its strange customs and even stranger people, was unlike any place she had ever encountered. John, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at ease here, though Zara knew he had his own share of struggles. They had talked a little about their pasts, but there was still much they didn't know about each other. Zara often found herself wondering about him, about the life he had before the crash, before everything had changed. One afternoon, as they sat together by the fire, Zara broke the silence. "John," she began, her voice quieter than usual. "You never really talked about your life, about where you come from." John looked up from the fire, his expression thoughtful. For a moment, he said nothing, as if weighing her question carefully. "I guess there's not much to tell," he said after a pause. "I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. Just a regular place, regular people. Nothing extraordinary, really." Zara nodded, feeling the familiar pull of curiosity. She had always been fascinated by the lives of others, especially those who lived in worlds so different from hers. "What made you leave?" she asked, her voice tinged with a curiosity she hadn't expected. John smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile, one that carried the weight of memories long buried. "I guess I always felt like I needed to find something more, something beyond the ordinary. I didn't know what, exactly, but I had this sense that there was more out there for me." Zara listened intently, her gaze never leaving his face. She could hear the longing in his voice, the desire for something greater, something beyond the familiar. It was a feeling she understood all too well. "That's how I felt," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Back home, I always felt like there was more, but I never knew what it was. I didn't know how to find it." John turned to her, his expression softening. "And now, here we are," he said with a quiet chuckle. "Maybe we both found something more, after all." Zara smiled at his words, the warmth of the fire reflecting in her eyes. "Maybe we did," she said, her voice barely above a murmur. There was a certain kind of peace in that thought. Maybe the journey wasn't just about getting home. Maybe it was about something else entirely. As the evening wore on, Zara found herself lost in thought, her mind wandering to places it hadn't in a long time. It was strange. She had spent so many years focused solely on survival, on getting by. But now, with John by her side, things felt different. The weight of her past, the uncertainty of the future, seemed less pressing. They were just two people in the vastness of the universe, sharing something real. Zara glanced at him, wondering if he felt it too. He caught her gaze and smiled, that same small, quiet smile that made her feel like she wasn't so alone anymore. "We'll figure this out," he said, as though reading her mind. "Together." Zara nodded, the words resonating deep inside her. "Together," she repeated, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest. It was more than just a promise. It was a bond, a quiet understanding that no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. And for the first time since the crash, Zara felt like maybe, just maybe, she could have a future here on Earth, whatever that future might look like. The days blurred together, each one feeling like a quiet promise of progress, until the day came when Zara and John stood at the wreckage of her ship, both of them silently aware of how much they had accomplished. The engine was functioning again, not perfectly, but enough to give them a real chance. It was a breakthrough, a sign that all their hard work had not been in vain. John's hands were covered in grease and dirt, his clothes a bit tattered, but there was something in his eyes that told Zara he felt the same satisfaction she did. He turned to her, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "It's working. It's not pretty, but it'll get you somewhere," he said, a small grin forming on his face. Zara nodded, her heart lifting in her chest. She had never imagined she would find herself on Earth, stranded and helpless. But in this moment, with John's help, the impossible felt just within reach. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. John shrugged, the smile never leaving his face. "No need for thanks. We're in this together, remember?" Zara felt a warmth in her chest at his words, a deeper understanding settling between them. They had come so far together, and now, She was closer than ever to the moment she had dreamed of, the moment when she could return to her home. Yet, as much as she longed for the comfort of the familiar, a small part of her felt conflicted. The past few weeks had changed her in ways she hadn't expected. Earth had become less of a strange, foreign place and more of a home, at least for now. John had become more than just a helper. He had become a friend, someone she could rely on. They had shared stories, their lives intertwined in ways neither of them had anticipated. There were still so many things she didn't know about him, but the bond between them had grown stronger every day. As she looked at the ship, the engine humming steadily, she realized how much she would miss the quiet moments they shared. How much she would miss him. She pushed the thought away, not wanting to let the feelings overwhelm her. The task at hand was still unfinished. She had a ship to repair, and she had a destination in mind. But as the sun began to set that evening, casting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Zara couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision that was looming over her. She had grown attached to this place, to the life she had built here, even if only for a short time. She had started to see Earth not just as a place of exile, but as a place of possibility. She had started to see herself as part of it, and that was something she had never imagined. John noticed her silence and glanced over at her, his expression softening. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his voice gentle. Zara hesitated, unsure of how to express the thoughts swirling in her mind. "I'm just thinking about what comes next," she said quietly. John nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "It's a big decision, isn't it?" Zara looked at him, meeting his gaze. "I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought I just wanted to go home. But now, I'm not so sure." John gave a small chuckle. "You're not the only one who's unsure of things," he said with a shrug. "I think I'm still figuring out my own path." There was a quiet understanding in his voice, one that resonated with Zara. It was a reminder that they were both still on their journeys, still searching for answers. But in that moment, surrounded by the quiet of the forest, with the fire crackling beside them, Zara realized that the answers weren't as important as the journey itself. She had come to Earth with nothing but uncertainty, but now, with John by her side, she had something far more valuable: hope. As the night grew darker, Zara and John sat in comfortable silence, the fire casting long shadows across the ground. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she could face it, whatever it might be. Together, they had come so far, and now, with the engine of her ship humming steadily, Zara felt that she could finally take the next step. But no matter what came next, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer alone. The sun rose slowly, casting its golden light through the trees as Zara stood in front of her ship, now fully repaired, its engine purring softly as if it had never been damaged. John stood beside her, his expression one of quiet satisfaction, though there was something more in his eyes, something unspoken, something he had been trying to put into words for days. They had spent weeks working together, side by side, each day bringing them closer to this moment. It had been a journey, physically, mentally, and emotionally, but now the ship was ready, and Zara was ready to leave. Yet, as she stood there, staring at the ship, she realized that leaving was not as simple as she had once thought. She had come to Earth with a singular purpose: to fix her ship and return home. But in the time she had spent here, with John, she had found something unexpected, something she hadn't anticipated, a sense of belonging, a feeling that she wasn't alone in the vastness of the universe. She had arrived on Earth thinking she would never fit in, that she would always be an outsider. But now, with John beside her, she felt a strange connection to this planet, to this world, and to him. "It's time, isn't it?" John's voice broke through her thoughts, soft and gentle, as he looked at her with a mixture of pride and something deeper, something more complicated. Zara turned to him, meeting his gaze. She could see the question in his eyes, the same one she had been asking herself. "Yes," she said quietly, the word feeling heavy in her chest. "It's time." John nodded, his expression still unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The forest around them was quiet, the birds beginning to stir as the day came to life. Zara could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but at the same time, there was a strange sense of peace. She knew what she had to do, but she also knew that leaving meant something more than just getting back to her home. It meant leaving behind the life she had started to build here. It meant saying goodbye to the human who had shown her kindness, who had helped her when she was at her most vulnerable. John had become more than just someone who fixed her ship. He had become someone she trusted, someone she cared about. I don't know what happens after this, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I'll ever see you again. John smiled, the warmth in his eyes softening the edges of his features. I don't know either, he replied. But no matter what happens, I won't forget this. I won't forget you. His words settled in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Zara's heart swelled, and for a moment, she felt as if the entire world had paused, as if time itself was holding its breath. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm, the warmth of his skin grounding her. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank you for everything. John looked down at her hand, then back into her eyes. You don't have to thank me, he said softly. It was the right thing to do. Zara nodded, the words sinking deep into her heart. It wasn't just about fixing her ship anymore. It was about something far more important, something she hadn't understood until now. It was about connection, about trust, about finding someone who cared, even when the odds seemed impossible. As she turned toward the ship, ready to take the first step toward her future, Zara felt a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. The stars, which had once seemed so distant and cold, now felt a little closer. And Earth, once a place of exile, now felt like a part of her story. She climbed into the ship, her heart still heavy but full of gratitude. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she had changed. She wasn't the same person who had crash-landed on this planet all those weeks ago. And with one last look at John, standing there in the clearing, watching her go, Zara whispered to herself, "Thank you, John." The ship's engine roared to life, and she lifted off, soaring into the sky, knowing that no matter how far she traveled, she would always carry a piece of this place with her. And as she disappeared into the vastness of space, Zara realized that home wasn't just a place. It was the people who made it feel like one.